This generation of kids, they're not only digital natives, they're environmental natives. This generation is more aware of the calamity that the planet is facing. The reality is there's a lot of anxiety out there, and eco-anxiety is a very real thing. There are kids out there that genuinely think the world is going to be ending in the next 8 years or so. For me, I just want to be an organisation that brings a lot of hope. So targeting kids is a powerful thing. And for us as young ocean explorers, I think through generational change, we can change the way that we view and treat our ocean within a generation of targeting kids, that they understand this amazing narrative and this amazing realm that we have in New Zealand that most of us have no idea about.
Hello, kia ora. I'm Anna.
And I'm Callum from Conservation Amplified.
And you're listening to the People Helping Nature podcast.
Our mission is to make conservation mainstream, one topic at a time.
In this episode, we're taking another look at the marine environment, following on from our last discussion with Sean Lee. Today, we're exploring how educating the next generation and sparking their curiosity is critical to healing our oceans. And we're stoked to be joined by Steve Hathaway, who has dedicated the last 20 plus years of his life to this space. Diver, oceanographer, educator, former TV show producer, and more. Welcome, Steve.
Thanks for having me.
Would you like to start by telling us a bit about your mission and what you're doing these days to bring that vision to life?
I just want to change the way we view and treat our ocean. As Kiwis, we're fantastic at celebrating our land and our unique natives, our Kias, Kiwis and Kauri trees. It's our international brand. Most people don't even realise that over 80% of our natives live in the ocean, over 93% of New Zealand's ocean. I just want to bring that into the Kiwi story. I think our best stories haven't been told yet.
So let's go back to the start. What happened that you decided to chase that life and to make a change for our oceans in New Zealand?
I think it's a whole lot of little steps. But I've just always had this incredible passion for the ocean, and I've always just loved sharing it with others, taking people on the boat and giving people an insight. But a big thing that happened to me would have been around 30 years ago. I live in Snow's Beach. We had a local TV channel called Family Television Network, and they had an ocean show called Ocean File. And so there was diving, surfing, sailing, fishing on the show. I was the diving presenter, and it was a zero budget show. So I was building at the time and would take time off to do the stories and interview some amazing people. But anyway, what it showed to me was the power of visual storytelling, that it wasn't just 2 or 3 people I was taking on the boat. I could actually get to a way bigger audience, and they put a spark in me that I thought one day I want to have my own underwater show, because I love showing this place off.
That's awesome. And how did it evolve from there? What led you, I guess, to pursuing this life? Because I understand you've done some competitive spearfishing and you've been involved in a few different forays over the years.
I just always loved getting in the water. My older brother dived, my dad dived, and when I was finally old enough, I started scuba diving. But spearfishing was a really, really big part of my life. I got rid of the scuba tanks for quite a few years, and it was kind of like there's no way scuba tanks were allowed on the boat, because free diving was the only way to do it. And wonderful. You learn a lot when you're spearfishing, because you spend so much time in the water, and you learn about fish behaviour, different species of fish, where they live, how you find them in different currents. So it's as well as the fitness aspect. So, amazing. Love that aspect of it. Love the competitions at different times of the year. But yeah, how did I get into it? I'd always be spending as much time in the water as I could. I would literally be, especially in summer, 4 or 5 times at least in the water each week, and even more.
So how did this love for the ocean transform in your career as a videographer and taking that to the next level, sharing what you were seeing with so many more people?
Being involved with Ocean File, it definitely put the spark there, and I thought one day I want to have my own show. And there was a bit of procrastination going about. There was a bit of, how can I make this happen as well? I had no idea. I had no experience with this kind of stuff. And some of my friends thought I was an absolute dreamer, because I would tell them one day I'm going to have my own show. But anyway, we went overseas as a family for a year. We lived in California, Southern California. And when we come back, I said to my wife, do you mind if I take a risk and chase my dream? And she was crazy enough to say yes. Little did she know how difficult it would be and how much it would cost. So I went and brought a really flash boat and brought a camera, and the idea was it was going to be Steve's spearfishing show. Like, I would take friends on my adventures and I was getting them to film my adventures. And I quickly discovered that, not trying to insult my friends, but they weren't underwater cameramen. They were pretty horrible at it. And out of desperation, I was bleeding money. And I thought, man, I can do better than this with a camera. And I was a very reluctant underwater cameraman. I wanted to be in front of the screen. But then something happened when I started filming, and I just fell in love with it. Just the images, being able to capture what I saw on this frame, that I could show it to other people. For me, when I first started filming, every day I'd get back from the water and I'd connect my camera to the TV and have my little kids sitting around the TV and mesmerized by it. And I thought, man, this is so cool. It was my favorite part of the day. And from there, I think some would call it lucky. I don't know. Like, I just think I'm meant to be doing this. And one of the adventures that we had, we were trying to spear a marlin and film it up at Aotearoa, and we found orca there. And I rang up Ingrid Visser, as I always would whenever I saw orca, and I said, hey, there's orca here. She came up. Anyway, at the end of that day, somehow we bumped into each other again, and for the first time in her life, I think she sat still and had dinner. And we had fish and chips together sitting at the wharf there at Aotearoa. And I said to her, I'd love to get you to Snow's Beach to do a presentation about orca. That week I emailed her. Little did we know the date that we set in stone, 6 months later. She didn't know she was going to have Jean-Michel Cousteau with her filming an orca documentary. And on the day that she was booked in 6 months in advance to speak in Snow's Beach about orca, we had orca turn up in the bay on that day. So she came down from Tutakaka with Jean-Michel Cousteau and his team. But anyway, because it was such a late evening, they all stayed in Snow's Beach that night. And the next morning, because I'm this budding underwater cameraman wanting to get into it, try to figure out how I could make this into my career. And I said to Ingrid, hey, do you mind having a talk to Jean-Michel? Ask him whether I can be a slave for the week. I will sleep on a couch. They can use my boat for free, just cover the gas. And I expected a no. Like, this guy's pretty famous. He's met more princes and kings than anybody but Bono. And to my surprise, he said yes. And I got to hang out with them for the week. It was very, very informative to me. Firstly, Jean-Michel Cousteau, I was blown away by his humility, how much his team loved him. He cooked us dinner the next night. It was amazing too. But anyway, hanging out with the cameraman, their director of photography, I got chatting with them, and they were exploring their next underwater camera that they were going to get. HD had only just come in. And so he told me the camera they had been doing homework about. I went and brought one straight away. There's another 50 or 60 grand down the drain. Anyway, Jean-Michel Cousteau and his team never got any orca footage when they were here, or good stuff underwater. This new camera arrived, and within a couple of weeks, Ingrid had rung me up and said, hey, there's orca at Snow's Beach. Do you want to go out filming with me? So we went out and we filmed orca. They circumnavigated an island that's out in front of the bay here called Kaua Island. And I got amazing footage of orca grabbing stingrays, and the first time it's been documented, of orca eating the liver and stuff like that. And Jean-Michel Cousteau had to use all my footage.
That's amazing. I think you can call it luck, but if you're willing to drop your job and go all in, and at the drop of a hat, spend a non-small amount of money on this fancy camera, I think in many ways that's creating your own luck, right?
Yeah, by that stage, I was in boots and all. It's not a cheap game, but I'm a very passionate person. I get into things very wholeheartedly, and this is something that means so much to me. This is way more than a job. I spend most of my waking moments, and a lot when I'm not awake, thinking about this stuff. But it's interesting, like the second job I was on was for Discovery TV, and it wasn't long after, I think it was the next season after Cousteau had been here. And I remember the director pulling me aside. They were only here in New Zealand for 10 days to film an orca documentary, and I thought, this is nuts. Like, we're going to be lucky to even see them once. But anyway, he pulled me aside and he said to me, Steve, I just want to explain something to you. He said, that cameraman there, He was an assistant cameraman for a number of years. He didn't even use the camera. Like, he would set it up and make sure it's working. Then the cameraman would come in and use it. Finally, he got experience enough that he would be the camera operator for TV shows. And then finally got into natural history filming, like natural history filming being filming animals for documentaries. And he goes, for some people, that's seen as the pinnacle, filming for natural history. Not everybody sees it that way, but obviously I do. And he goes, I just want to tell you something. The way you've got into this is not normal. Your first job, you filmed for Jean-Michel Cousteau. And the second job, you're filming for Discovery TV. This does not normally happen. And it's very cool.
I think sometimes sacrificing a lot for the opportunity, for the dream, makes the stars align for you. It's so easily said and done, you were lucky, but there's so much hard work gone into that moment that created that change for you. And hats off to you, Steve, for putting yourself out there and chasing the dream. More people should consider doing that, in my mind. But how did your work evolve from that, from filming major ocean documentaries to educating children later on in your journey?
Yeah, well, that was an absolute surprise to me. I was always looking how I could do my own TV show, and the ideas weren't really coming. I'd done a teaser for another show and it didn't really come off. But then I'd been filming at the Alderman Islands off Coromandel Peninsula just this one particular day, and when I'd been filming, it was a beautiful blue ocean, sun flickering through it, kelp moving in the wave action, and beautiful fish that I was filming. Also, I had a seal swimming around me. Epic. So anyway, when I'd finished filming, I was swimming back towards the boat, and I looked up on the surface as I swam back towards the boat, and I saw this kelp gathered together in a line floating on the surface. Now, kelp is normally attached to the bottom of the ocean, but when you have a storm or a big swell, it can get broken off, and because it's buoyant, it floats on the surface. And because there's currents in the ocean, it gathers everything together in a line. So anyway, I went underneath it looking for little critters to film. But for the first time, all of a sudden, I was like, plastic, plastic, plastic. And I started filming this plastic, trying to make it look as beautiful as possible. And then I got home that night, and my then 12-year-old daughter, Riley, said to me, hey, Dad, I need to do a project about the ocean, and I want to do it about turtles and plastic. And I was like, what the heck? Like, I've been filming for all these years, and for the first time I'd filmed plastic in the ocean that morning, and she didn't know this. So anyway, she interviewed Dan Goodall, New Zealand's turtle expert. I got him up to our house. She asked him questions that kids would want to know about turtles and plastic. This is just for a school project. I cut together a 7.5-minute video, including footage of that plastic I filmed that particular day, and also turtle footage in New Zealand. And her action plan was to show it to her 10-year-old brother's class. And I just went along as a dad to support her, no expectations at all. But what happened was this 7.5-minute video played, and I watched 30 kids' eyes just go. Huge eyes, deathly quiet for 7.5 minutes, mesmerized. And then at the end of it, my daughter got up and just totally owned the class and said, hey, I want all of you to sit in a circle, and I want you to explain one thing unique you learned from the video. And every kid said something that they thought was unique about the video. I just had this light bulb moment, bing, in my mind. It's like, oh my goodness, I had no idea. My kids have always been exposed to the ocean. We've always had boats. And the best idea has been sitting underneath my roof, and I didn't even realize it. Man, kids are into this stuff. So I chewed over this idea for 2 weeks. And then I said to Riley, hey, would you be into doing any other interviews with experts and any other creatures? And her eyes lit up, and she goes, yeah. And I said, what would you do? And she goes, oh, I'd do Maui dolphins, orcas, stingrays. And I just had no idea my daughter was into this stuff. So I thought, that game on, this is cool. So I approached what now New Zealand's most popular kids TV show that most of us are growing up on, and finally got that across the line, and we did 2 seasons with them. And the idea was young ocean explorers, Riley going on adventures into her dad's world, looking for the biggest, most fascinating marine creatures. And on the journey, we meet an expert, we learn some cool facts, and it's all just about inspiring a whole generation of kids to want to stick a mask on and check it out for themselves.
That's amazing. And I love that you went on What Now. That was a fun part of my childhood, watching that on the weekends.
Hey, it was a life highlight for me, man. It was so cool.
That's awesome. So you did 2 seasons, 20 episodes, right?
Yeah.
And then what happened after that?
I had a few people that wanted to pitch us as an international show, and we never got that across the line. But Greenstone TV, Rachel Anthony there that runs it, really loved what we did. And she pitched us to New Zealand On Air about doing an online platform and won that, which was great. And so we had a team of us that developed Young Ocean Explorers website. It was an amazing process because things were starting to change quite quickly, going from TV to online.
What year was this? Like, just for context.
I think it must have been about 8 years ago. There was a lot online then, but I think a lot of people thought TV was going to last forever. But, the writing was on the wall. And so one of the big questions that we had was, how do we reach kids in a crowded online space when YouTube has a number of million videos uploaded each day? Get your head around that. Unbelievable. And that's just one platform. So how do we capture kids' imaginations with storytelling when it's a crowded online space? So we had a user experience researcher in the team, Liz Bush, who was amazing. What we ended up coming up with was we decided to target teachers and put tools on their belts that we ticked the boxes of the curriculum. We gave them highly engaged students and we made their job easy. So we decided to target teachers because for every teacher we got, we automatically got 28 kids that would have to watch our content. And it's proven to be a very effective strategy.
I've got a question for you, Steve, with the teachers in particular. Now, a lot of Kiwis are connected to the ocean. They hold a strong connection. But you mentioned it before, a few people are also quite fearsome of the ocean. So how did you turn teachers with that attitude around to become passionate and then pass that on to their class?
It's true. There is a lot of fear around the ocean, but it's also the most wonderful and the most fascinating place. And it's really easy to tell stories about the ocean and different creatures. That nature is just incredible. It just opens itself up for being fascinating for kids. Things like a sea cucumber. Looks like this giant worm on the bottom of the ocean, but it breathes through its backside. Like, kids love that kind of stuff. It also there's a little fish called a pearlfish. And now all fish, we need places to live. And there's fish that live in the middle of the ocean. There's fish that live on the reef. And when you're little, there's bigger things that want to eat you. So everything needs somewhere to hide. The pearlfish has a very amazing place that it's decided to live. What it does, it'll go out and feed. And when it wants to go back into its home, it'll go to the back of a sea cucumber and wait there patiently until a sea cucumber breathes through its backside. And then the pearlfish just like goes inside and hides there. Anyway, nature is so cool. And, doing stories around different creatures here, like for me, I just remember back to when I was a kid and I just loved going out in nature and finding wetters and different things. And it's just about making kids curious and fascinated by it. I want to tell stories in such a way that even if they currently don't have access to the ocean, there's a lot of kids whose parents aren't inclined, aren't interested, or haven't got the means to go to the ocean, even in Auckland City, which is unreal when we're surrounded by ocean. But that's the reality of it. And I love saying to kids that one day, when you're older, you're going to be earning your own money. And hopefully we've done stories in such a way that they want to go and explore this place.
Yeah, I think what I'm taking away is that it's not through sharing facts, figures, problems, and obligation. It's through sharing stories and through sparking curiosity through the way that we naturally engage and remember things.
100%. And of course, there's going to be facts and figures thrown in there, but the facts and figures aren't at the front of it. The storytelling's the important thing. But it's really important to tell accurate information about animals as well, because I remember a scientist saying to me, Tom Trinsky, who works at the Auckland Museum, and he said to me, Steve, don't dumb it down too much for kids. Just use simple words. Just remember that 4-year-olds know what a Tyrannosaurus Rex is. So don't dumb it down too much. And it was great advice that kids, even at a young age, have the capability to absorb so much information, but just doing it in such a fun way that there's just something about the age that we target 5 to 13-year-olds. It's quite a broad age range, but it's definitely is that age that they are so curious and interested and get excited about things. And I'm absolutely convinced, and I say this to Riley, my daughter, who was 12, she's now 24, working full-time with Young Ocean Explorers. And we do lots of presentations into schools. And I said to her, man, just remember every presentation that you do, that I'm absolutely convinced that you can change the direction of at least a few kids' lives in that room by the stories you tell. Because I know that's what happened to me when I was little. It was reading stories about other people having amazing adventures that changed my life forever and put me on a very different direction. So that's something that really guides me in what I do.
That's awesome. And I think, like, being a child, it is your formative years. Personally, for me, my first spark towards conservation that I can remember was a school trip to Kelly Tarleton's. And I ended up going down the business route and becoming a marketer, and I've come full circle. And in the last year or two, I've been thinking a lot about that point and how that influenced my whole view of the world, just from an afternoon wandering around this amazing facility that is Kelly Tarleton's. So with your experience in schools, what kind of impacts have you seen on children? And I guess, for one, like, what are the children seeing? But then how is that affecting the family when they take those messages home?
Early on, like when we first started with Young Ocean Explorers, I just wanted to inspire a whole generation about the ocean and bring alive New Zealand's underwater story. That was the first thing. We never set out to be an environmental movement or an environmental organisation. But I remember hearing a story a few years in from doing Young Ocean Explorers about two young girls from Veron Road Primary School. And they had seen our story about Stacey the sea turtle that we released at the Portnight Islands. And Stacey, I remember it vividly. Turtles, when they come ashore in New Zealand, are sick because they don't nest here. And the only time that turtles come ashore is to nest or if they're not well. So when they come ashore, you ring up DOC, 0800 DOC Hot. Somebody will pick it up or go to the New Zealand Centre of Conservation and Medicine at the Auckland Zoo, and they'll x-ray it, make sure it's okay. Then they send them to Kelly Tarleton's and they get nursed back to health. And around February, March, when the temperature of the ocean's at its peak, they'll release them back into the ocean. So anyway, I've been lucky to go to many of these releases, and one of them we filmed for Young Ocean Explorers at the Portnights. And I remember Stacey the turtle was held on the back of the boat about to be released. It was flapping its flippers, trying to get into the water. I was in the water with Riley. We filmed it, and all of a sudden you see Stacey just take off and checking out this new amazing world. Anyway, after we'd filmed this story, on the swimming back to the boat, again, I found this line of kelp floating on the surface, a current line, and I knew what we're going to find. Sure enough, plastic. We filmed it for the show. I got Riley picking it up in front of the camera. TV gold, releasing a turtle, finding plastic that turtles eat in the ocean. We went to the back of the boat and we were interviewing Dan Goodoi. And he just said a throwaway line. Firstly, he said, oh man, even at the Portnights, no one would ever throw plastic in the water here. Plastic, when it comes off the coast, it just gets in the currents and it just ends up everywhere. And he said this one throwaway line. He said, wouldn't it be great if every Kiwi picked up at least one piece of plastic a day? There would be millions of pieces of plastic not going in the ocean. So we included that in our episode. Fast forward a couple of years later, I heard about these two girls that had this idea at Veron Road Primary School. They'd seen about Stacey the turtle. They'd heard that one throwaway line, wouldn't it be great if everybody picked up one piece of plastic a day? And they come up with an idea, 1+ a day. They wrote a song that all the school learnt. They put posters around the school and they were encouraging kids to pick up one piece of plastic a day in their school. For me, I thought, this is genius. Like, this isn't an old guy like me coming up with an idea, trying to inspire kids. This is kids coming up with their own ideas. So a couple of years later after this, I finally got some funding because I thought, man, I want to tell this story about these two girls. Because I just wanted to share something I love doing is I love taking the mystery out of how people do things. I think sometimes as kids, we can look at older people that have done great stuff and go, oh, they're so clever, I could never do that. But they don't realize that these clever people were once little kids, just like them. just normal people like me, like you. And I like taking the mystery out of it. And so we did a story about 1+ a day. And we also did a campaign video around 1+ a day. And it's been our most popular video. And it's just, there's something about kids. They are a powerful force in the family. And I look back in New Zealand when we've wanted to change behaviors of adults. And there's at least 3 times that I can remember that we have intentionally targeted kids to change the behavior of adults. 3 campaigns that I can think of: slip, slop, slap, using kids to encourage us. The squeaky wheel, Mum, Dad, we're going to put sunscreen on. Make it click. A similar thing. Dad, we can't go yet. Got to put the seatbelt on. And if for no other reason a parent's going to listen, it's just to shut up the squeaky wheel. That's just the kind of way it works in a family sometimes, you know. Another one was stop smoking. And another one was apparently recycling. When they first started in Auckland, it wasn't going well until they targeted the kids, and then it took off. So targeting kids is a powerful thing. And for us as young ocean explorers, I think we can, through generational change, we can change the way that we view and treat our ocean within a generation of targeting kids, that they understand this amazing narrative and this amazing realm that we have in New Zealand that most of us have no idea about. We are a nation that is obsessed with the ocean, but most of it is sitting on the top of its surface. We have the best sailors. We have the best kayakers. We have the best surf lifesavers. We're experts on the ocean. But underneath that beautiful glistening surface, there is so much unknown about our nation's story. And this is what we want to bring alive. And this is what we want to inspire a whole generation of kids about, that within a generation, through the squeaky wheel, I think we can change the way we behave and treat this ocean.
That is so cool, Steve. But just coming back to the kids, I think kids have a magic to them that a lot of us lose growing up. And I also think us adults, we quite often want to take things onto the serious bandwagon, but kids want to have fun. And I think through fun, you can achieve more sometimes than through serious facts and the doom and grim of what's going on.
Yeah. Hey, this generation of kids, they're not only digital natives, they're environmental natives. This generation is more aware of the calamity that the planet is facing. The reality is there's a lot of anxiety out there, and eco-anxiety is a very real thing. You know, there are kids out there that genuinely think the world is going to be ending in the next 8 years or so. For me, I just want to be an organisation that brings a lot of hope, and things can get quite serious. We've been into schools that teachers have been way too serious and doing things in quite a scary way for kids as well. And like for me, I want to bring hope, you know, and we've done a whole lot of hope stories. And what I class as a hope story is they're just stories about normal people like you and me that have seen an issue, they've had an idea, they've put some steps into place and they're making a difference. And I love highlighting people like that.
I find that fascinating and really vibe with what you're saying about telling stories of hope and of people doing things and taking initiative. That, I guess, aligns well with what we're doing at People Helping Nature. There's so much doom and gloom, but I do think that the action goes where the attention flows. And so by putting attention into positive, hopeful things, it tells people they can do that. And I think the more of this we have, the more good actions we're going to have on a grassroots level. But if we look at the reality today, cell phones are, and devices in general, are somewhat all-encompassing for a very large part of our society. I'm personally guilty of this short-form video. It really gets your attention. And this can disconnect us from nature. And for the next generation and following generations, they've grown up with screens from very early on. They didn't experience a time before screens. In this reality, how do we ensure that kids get connected with nature? Like, how do we make sure that these dopamine hijacking centers don't just consume us and that this amazing world around us actually gets paid attention to?
I think it just takes a lot of intentionality as parents. Like, I'm guilty of being on devices too often. It's kind of terrifying. I think, man, how much productive time do I waste on devices? And as a dad, it's just trying to be intentional about figuring out fun ways of getting your kids into nature. You know, like we definitely have resistance at times. It's easy to want to stay at home and not do anything, but it's just trying to do fun things that you get out and do, and you do exploring. And, you know, if I think, man, at times I struggle with my mental health because I'm not getting in nature, like how much more our kids can. So just as parents, just trying to be intentional and trying to find things that are fun.
I think that's really important. Only by exposure to nature can we have a connection with nature that runs deep. Do you have any other advice, Steve, that you would like to share with parents that are listening right now?
Yeah, hey, I reflect on when I was growing up. My dad was a science teacher, and he turned some of our holidays into science stuff. Like I remember one particular holiday, we were at Piha, staying there, and he gave us all an assignment each. We had to study some different shellfish. I had periwinkles. Like, what parent does that? I wouldn't have written anything, but it was just, we had to learn something about it. But like with my dad, it was always about nature when we're out there. And I learned about periwinkles, that they can be 10 meters above where the waves are because they just need a bit of spray every so often to keep them moist. Really cool. But my dad was always very intentional about, you know, we would be walking around the rocks and he would explain things to us and different species or fun things about it, and just making us curious about nature, you know, to going and exploring together. There's so many wonderful free places we can go in New Zealand. So anyway, parents, get your kids into nature. Get them into stuff that they enjoy and try to, like, you can't avoid getting kids off devices, but just finding things that you connect on together, that you get them out and being active and healthy as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. A good friend of mine came down with his son, 5-year-old son, to the Bay of Plenty recently, and we were taking him for a bushwalk, and I started showing him the different plants and where they live and what their uses are. And it's just, I nerd out when I'm in the bush. I just do that. And every time I've seen his kid from now on, he's always like, where is this plant? Where's that plant? And so I think also sometimes we don't realize how much they're absorbing of the situation. And so, yeah, that's awesome. But I just want to shift topics a little bit and talk about how we get the vast majority of Kiwis on board with helping the ocean. In our pre-chat, we have a chat before recording to get to know each other, and in that conversation you said something along the lines of, if someone burned down the Waitakere Ranges, there would be a nationwide outcry. Yet we're destroying the ocean ecosystems on a much larger scale. It's happening before our eyes but out of sight. So we have this love affair with the ocean. It's in our DNA, it's in our identity, but as a country, we're so unaware of the state of it. Like, what's going on here?
It's really easy to connect with the land. And for those out of Auckland, the Waitakere Ranges are the main ranges in Auckland. So I used to have a view of them from West Auckland when I grew up. That's why I use that example. We have a love affair with the land, and so we should. Like, it's so beautiful in New Zealand. And Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and Narnia movies have taken it to the world. The world knows a story about New Zealand. But really, it is just as unique. It is, in my mind, even more beautiful in the ocean. I think when it's out of sight, out of mind is so used, that statement, but it really is. In my short lifetime, the changes I've seen is heartbreaking. There was one moment that really stood out for me. I remember going to the northern side of Little Barrier Island, Aotearoa Island. Now, Little Barrier Island was the first, I've forgotten what the official designation is, but it was the first nature reserve. And it's seen as possibly the most intact ecosystem in New Zealand. I remember diving on the northern side. It's my favourite place. Really, like, the conditions are perfect for fish. There's deep water going into shallow water, lots of current, lots of kelp. Very, very fishy spot. I love hanging out there. So one year I'm diving, filming it with kelp. I was there with Jamie McDowell, filming with her and her now husband, Jake, and beautiful kelp. The next year I went back and I swam the same coastline, and I would have swam over 1 kilometre and I would have seen like 2 stalks of kelp. So it went from this dense, lush forest to absolute barren rock. Now, when you get rid of the forest on the land, you get rid of all the diversity of life, because, there's a lot of animals that need it for habitat, they need it for nesting, they need it for food. When you get rid of the trees, you're going to get rid of a lot of the invertebrates as well. You're not going to have all the birds and everything in the pup and that. So you're going to lose so much diversity of life. And it's exactly the same with the kelp forests, that you lose all the diversity. So anyway, I had this experience, like I forced myself to carry on swimming and I was almost crying, just heartbroken, going, holy crap. That's called a kinnibarrow. When the predators have been taken down in numbers, not enough predators to keep on top of the kinna. And the kinna aren't actually the culprits, but when they do explode in numbers, they just mow down the kelp forest. It's all around the world, is happening in temperate waters. Anyway, the next weekend I went to Kelp Island that I've spent a lot of time, and I swam probably about 2 kilometres. And the same kind of thing, where I'd seen kelp forests recently and they'd been mown down. It's like, my goodness, this is on my watch. It makes me really reflect on, I just wonder if we talk to some of the older people and said, in your lifetime, we're going to lose a lot of the kelp forests in northern New Zealand. You're going to struggle to find a legal power. Crayfish numbers are going to be functionally extinct in the Hauraki Gulf. They're going to be such diminished numbers that you struggle to get them. The mussel beds are going to be gone. You're going to have muddy surface over a lot of them close to the coast because of sedimentation. A lot of these things, if you had said this to some old people 60 years ago, they'd go, that is physically impossible. It's not going to happen. There's so much life in the ocean. And I think that's kind of the way the ocean's been treated, that we think it's going to last forever. But this has happened on our watch.
Yeah, totally. It's really insane, right? Like, that's not a long time. 1 year and going from habitat to habitat gone, that is insane. Like, I'm struggling to fathom just the speed that nature works sometimes if it's out of balance. So how do we change this, Steve? How do we get people on board with marine protection, in particularly in their own local backyard where they're so used to taking?
One thing that I take a lot of heart from, in the last 6-7 years, there's been a huge increase in awareness of the ocean. We've got wonderful groups like Live Ocean. We've got a local group in Matheson's Bay here that are reforesting or rewilding the kelp. They've got permits to get rid of the kinna, and the kelp comes back real fast. And they're telling stories with that. Live Ocean has just announced, I think today or yesterday, about Jono Riddler, a wonderful guy, who's going to swim from North Cape to Wellington to bring awareness to bottom trawling and to bottom impact, like scallop dredges that just absolutely annihilate the bottom. So the great thing is that I'm seeing lots of people that are starting to raise their hand and tell stories about this stuff and being creative in the way they do it. There's some neat stories out there. One of my favorite stories is a good friend, Dr. Rochelle Constantine with Auckland University. There was an issue in Auckland Harbour in the Waitemata and the Hauraki Gulf of this amazing place that for some reason these whales have chosen to live here. We're one of only 2 or 3 places in the world that have a resident population of Bryde's whales. But the issue that they have is they've chosen to live in a very busy port. There's a lot of large boats that come in and out. And so there was an issue that on average 2 whales a year were getting killed by ship strike. And so, this is obviously an issue. So Rochelle, who's a marine mammal expert, put her thinking cap on, and there was a group of users of the ocean, the ports of Auckland, the shipping companies, iwi, scientists, and others that come together. No one wants to kill whales. And they come up with this idea of a voluntary protocol. They used the science through Rochelle's team that showed that these whales spent most of their time less than 10 meters. The deepest hulls going underneath the water are 10 meters deep. And they also showed that if you hit a whale at 20 knots, which is the average speed of these boats, when they come in, and it's almost 100% fatality rate. If you could take it down to 10 knots, the fatality rate was a lot less. And so using science And using collaboration, they come up with an idea of a voluntary protocol of ships slowing to 10 knots when they're in a Hauraki Gulf from Little Barrier or from Cape Colville coming in. And since then, I think there's been no officially documented Brewers whales that have been killed in that time. So effectively, I can't remember how long ago that happened, maybe 9 years. So effectively, they may have saved like 18 whales' lives through effective science, through communication, through collaboration of people coming together, seeing an issue and trying to solve the problem.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. And there's so many inspiring stories like this, but there's still a huge gap between the people that understand the problems and solutions and the rest of the country, to put it bluntly. I was doing a lot of snorkeling around the Hauraki Gulf maybe 16, 17, 18 years ago, and even back then there were kinnabarrens. You could see where the dredges had gone through and the kelp was ripped out. And at the same time, so many people I knew were talking about how much snapper they could take out of the water. So, there's a really clear connection, and I know that the more you get into the space, it's easy to get almost combative, like you forget the journey that you've been on to go from not knowing the issue to fighting for the solution or pursuing the solution. And that can sometimes come across as aggression and sometimes come across as what you have the best intention, but maybe in your passion you push people away. But like, we can create this name for like, oh, those greenies, they just don't want us to take fish, they don't want us to enjoy our lives, why can't we do all these things, it's just restricting. How do we like bridge this gap? Like, how do we change it from what am I missing out on to like, what am I leaving for the next generation? Or how do we make sure that the way that we communicate actually brings people together instead of pushes them apart?
We've got to be careful as environmental organisations that we remember who our target audience actually is. That if we want to improve the environment, you're not necessarily wanting your main audience just to be people that believe the same stuff as you. And I think it's really easy when you've been doing this stuff for a long time. Sometimes when you surround yourself with the same people, you forget who your target audience is. And I think if we talk down to people and forget where we've once been, like I look at my journey and I intentionally, when I speak to environmental groups, that I'll put photos up on my presentation that I hope will upset people. And they'll go, oh my goodness, like a big pile of crayfish I caught when I was young, or spearing a giant bluefin tuna, or spearing a marlin. Or I remember speaking to a whole lot of dock managers, and I brought out a letter that many years ago at Goat Island, I broke open some kinners to feed snapper and I got caught doing it. And I got a letter from Doc warning me that I was breaking the rules. And I knew I was breaking the rules, but I had some friends from America I wanted to impress with all these big snapper, and we couldn't find any. And I was like, oh, there's no one around, I can do it. And Tony and Jenny Enderby caught me. It was great. Anyway, they sent me this letter. I just love showing people that kind of stuff, because I just say to people, this is the people that we're talking to. Don't forget where all of us come from. And I don't want to forget some of the dumb things I've done in the ocean. And I need to remind myself, like sometimes when you've got a lack of knowledge, or you just, for me, a lot of it was just about getting a feed. And when I was into spearfishing, it was all about, I would only spear the big snapper. I wanted to only spear snapper over 10 pound, preferably over 20 pound. And I don't want to forget that part of my journey. I'm not actually embarrassed about it because I just had a lack of knowledge. But like for me, who sees things differently, and I know you want to leave those big snapper alone, for me to go to someone that's into catching big snapper and point the finger and go, you dirty mongrel, don't do that, you're stuffing the reef. All I've gone and done is I've instantly shut off dialogue, probably for the rest of our lives. That person will lose respect for me. And it's just trying to figure out how we communicate and who our target audience is. And so like I often think about, we're all on this journey of differing levels of environmental awareness. If you look at a scale from 0 to 10, 0 is no awareness at all and just throwing crap out your window and littering and no concern about environmental impact at all, to I don't know what number 10 is, wearing grass skirts and doing your own gardening and trying to walk everywhere and that. But we're all on a different place. And it's like, for me to be wherever I am on that level and talk to people at the same level, as expecting them to be at the same level of 30 years of learning and being surrounded by people that have been gracious to me. And I think we just need patience with people. I know things are changing quite quickly, but I think the rules are the same. You've got to treat people with respect, and there's different ways of reaching people. I think there's a place for the in your face about some of the environmental impacts, some of the organizations do, but I think we just got to treat people with respect as well.
I totally agree. Thank you so much, Steve, about being so open about this. I think the conservation sector is guilty of getting too comfortable in our own little silo and also sometimes forgetting our own journey. And I often, what you just described, I call it creating positive conservation experiences for people by being the people who are there with empathy and are trying to educate, awareness, and don't come with the big stick. Because as you said, so often you're actually not achieving anything but shutting that person off for the rest of their lives, and they're not going to come around anymore because of that one really, really negative experience. But I also think sometimes it's really important to ensure that the information we're putting out there is correct. And there's a lot of misinformation, false science. How can we ensure that we navigate through that correctly and ensure that people get the correct information to make better choices?
This is getting more and more difficult in that, on social media, the algorithm just feeds stuff that we already believe, and we surround ourselves with people that are the same. So if you look at my friend group on Facebook, I intentionally have got friends on very different scales of how we see things, and I intentionally do that because I want to understand how other people think. I've got very good friends who are commercial fishermen and real heavy into recreational fishermen that may do things differently than I think is necessarily a great way to do it. But I intentionally surround myself with people like that. I think it's really important that we understand how people are thinking and hearing their viewpoints and trying to get an understanding. It is really, really difficult. But I think there's some clever examples. One example of getting the information right and doing it in a real clever way. And obviously these are people at the top of their game, but the movie Ocean with David Attenborough, I think it's masterful storytelling. It's at the people at the top of their game. So we can't compare ourselves with them. It's the most beautiful footage, magnificent, but it's really well thought out. It's really well crafted, but scaling that back to what we can do, I think there is a real place for taking a backwards foot and trying to understand the way other people see things. And I think we need to figure out language that can communicate and stories that can communicate in a language that they understand. But I think it is becoming more difficult. One thing that I'm thinking around a lot, and there's a lot of misinformation about, is around marine protection. It's a really interesting one because there's been a few surveys done that I think WWF did one, Live Ocean did one, and it shows the vast majority of people believe or want more marine protection. The interesting thing about that is that we say we want more marine protection, but what happens is great idea. Let's have more marine protection. How about we protect that bay just out in front of where you live? And all of a sudden, it's whoa. My granddad's been fishing there forever. Where am I going to go? I've only got a little boat. That's the best shore fishing spot in the area, or that's my favorite spot. And something I've been thinking about and reflecting on a lot, because the latest science is saying we need to protect 30% of the ocean, definitely territorial seas, 30%, and don't overfish the rest, and the ocean will be sustainable. So I've been reflecting on that a lot. And it's really interesting because New Zealand has got this reputation for doing some great things on the land. I've looked back on the concept of national parks and protecting the land, and there were some courageous people many, many years ago that could see what was happening, that a lot of New Zealand was being burnt off so it could be claimed as farmland. A lot of forests were getting cut down, and some people had this idea as man, we need to start protecting some areas, otherwise we're not going to have any of this left. And they probably didn't think about it in our unique flora and fauna, that we got flightless birds, but they were just seeing the devastation, and if it carried on, we'd have nothing left. Anyway, this idea came out, and they had a lot of opposition. Some of the arguments I've seen were, where are we going to get our trees from? We're going to lose jobs. Who will go to the forest? But many years later, after these visionary people had this idea and had the courage to pursue it despite much opposition, many years later, we look at it and go, man, I'm so grateful they did that. That some people took a hit so future generations could enjoy it. And we are the future generations that are enjoying it. I think New Zealand's at that stage in our story that we need to be more courageous and more visionary about the ocean.
Yeah, and I think, like, if we were to fast forward a few decades and look back, we're not going to regret protecting the ocean. It's not like we're going to go, damn, I wish we took more of the fish and didn't leave so much for the next generation. So what does it mean to be a good ancestor?
Well, I think firstly, I think a lot of the conversations we're having around the ocean, a lot of the argument is, what am I missing out on? Rather than thinking about, what am I giving to future generations? And as a parent, I think the older you get, the more you get thinking about a legacy you're leaving your kids. What am I leaving them behind when I die? As far as equity and property or whatever, But I think we need to think about that with nature as well. And it's like, it's not what am I losing out on. The movie Ocean with David Attenborough showed it so graphically that when they protect the northwestern islands of the Hawaiian island chain, it's one of the biggest marine protected areas in the world. The yellowfin population took off, and the spillover happened, that the fishing outside is exponentially better. Similar in the Channel Islands in California, in central and southern California. There's a lot of marine protected areas there now, and the crayfish populations have come back, and the crayfishermen outside the marine protected areas are saying there's an abundance that we haven't seen. They're benefiting from it. So a lot of the arguments currently are around even the high protected areas in the Gulf that have just been established. It's like, what am I missing out on? Yes, for me personally, some of my best spearfishing spots off Kaua Island, Motoreka and Motukirikiri, and also the Mokahino Islands, that is my area. I've had the most sensational diving, spearfishing, fishing out there, and now I'm no longer allowed to do it. Yes, that is some sacrifice, but I just look at it and go, you know what? In 20 years' time, in 30 years' time, it's going to be so epic. We have a place called the Portnoy Islands. This was a highly fished area. It was some of the best snapper fishing in Northland was at the Portnoy. And people were absolutely furious. People lost work, like there was there was charter boats that would go out there for the snapper fishing. People took a hit, but many years down the track, it's seen as one of the best diving places in the world. There is a huge dive industry that's been built around it. There's millions of dollars that come into the local economy because of these protected areas. These areas at the Mokahino Islands, man, I want my kids and grandkids to go and, in 20 and 30 years' time, we're going to say it's the best thing we ever did. These places will be flourishing.
And I just want to add a note, like an analogy here. You talked about how being a good ancestor, you start thinking about what is the equity and the wealth I'm leaving for my children financially. I think there's a really clear financial analogy here, which is right now we're spending the equity in our home. We're not living off the interest. If we just let the equity of our oceans build up, we can live off the interest. We can live off the growth of the interest. That capital, as if we were talking about property, keeps growing. Our fish stocks, our ocean health, our kelp forests keep growing. And the interest, the returns on our investment today can grow for not just years, not just generations, but the foreseeable future. And I think if we want to put a very human lens on it, that's a good way of looking at it, is like, do you want to just spend your family's wealth or your nation's wealth to nothing? Or do you want to have this renewable resource of joy, of ecotourism, of food, of all the other things, wellness connection? And I think it's a really good way of looking at it.
Yeah, there's going to be an amazing spillover from these different areas. There's going to be an abundance, and it's going to spill into other areas as well. But it's also, some of the argument is it's going to be a lot more pressure in some of the other areas. And yes, that's partially true. In the case of the Hauraki Gulf, you still got 94% of the Gulf you're allowed to fish in. It's not as if we've got a lack of areas. The way I look at it is like, don't we want to have some places that at least give us the closest glimpse of what it used to be like before humans came here? That we've got places like Goat Island and the Poor Knights and other places. Wouldn't it be great if we had places all around the country that kids anywhere and families anywhere can go and get a glimpse of something that's way more thriving than what we're currently having around the coastline?
100%. So how can people be part of that solution? What can people do in their everyday lives to change and to contribute to that better future?
I think a number of things. Firstly, just surround yourself with people that have a bit more knowledge about this than yourself. People that are making a difference. Some of the organisations that are doing great stuff in the ocean, and learn more about it and how important the ocean is. And just expand your thinking. We have the opportunity every 3 years to vote. It's something that I think politicians, if enough of us say we're sick of this, the cynical part of me is they'll change just to keep their jobs. But the reality is if we say we want change and there's enough of us that say we want change, that we can put pressure.
Thank you so much, Steve, for sharing all of this info today with us. And people, go out there and make your voices heard. Where can people learn more about Young Ocean Explorers?
Hey, we've got a website, youngoceanexplorers.com. You can also contact us at info@youngoceanexplorers.com. We want to change New Zealand's story. I want to reach every child in New Zealand. There's 550,000 kids in our demographic, age 5 to 13. I want to reach every single one of them. We want to scale up what we're doing. If you want to join and be part of this with our mission, we want to get more educators going into schools. We would love more people to jump on and join us and help us, enable us to do this.
Thank you.
Amazing. Kia ora,
Thanks so
Steve.
much. It's been a great chat.
Thanks so much for having me. It's been wonderful talking.